so that's really wonderful. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jill Sohm. I'm the Interim Director of the Environmental Studies Program. And we are so excited to have our first, well, this is in the end our first speaker for this series because we had to reschedule the previous one. This is Shelley Billik, and before I give just this little intro here, I met Shelley because of an alumni of the Environmental Studies Program, who I'm not even sure if she's still working for you, but Kenya Gomez.
One? Kenya.
Yeah.
She actually just went on to get a job at SCS Engineers, which is a very prestigious environmental engineering firm.
Great.
And I'm very proud of her.
So Kenya Gomez graduated 2 years ago, and I happened to see her at an event that I went to, and she said, "My boss is here, and I'm going to introduce you to her." And usually when I meet somebody like that, I say, "Can I get your business card, and I'm going to call you to give a talk."
And you kept it.
And thank goodness Shelley agreed to come. Shelley has a long career in the sustainability field. A few of her highlights, she was the Vice President of Environmental Initiatives at Warner Brothers Studios, where she launched programs for waste prevention, reuse and recycling, supply chain, energy efficiency, water conservation, green building, solar energy, and alternative fuels. She's currently a project manager at Clements Environmental Corporation. She's spearheading the company's work in developing outreach and education for the City of Los Angeles' Recycle LA initiative. She's also the CEO of her own consulting company, EcoBiz. She's got a recycling and solid waste management certificate from UCLA. She's a fellow at the Aspen Institute. She's a lead accredited professional and has more than 25 years of experience in the sustainability field. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. It's my utmost pleasure to be here, and I'm always heartened to see and meet, especially young people who are interested in getting into the sustainability field. I have always felt like we need a lot more soldiers out in the field, and we need to keep expanding and making our voices heard. So I'm very privileged, honored to be here. I threw together a few slides, but I want to kind of just talk to you, and I really want to hear what your thoughts and questions might be for me. When I started my career, the word sustainability, I had never even heard of the word sustainability. It wasn't being used, certainly not in the private sector, in the business world. There weren't programs like at USC for environmental studies, and I studied psychology in college, and really not quite knowing how or where I was going to land, or how I was going to use that. So my story is probably somewhat unique, and I think everybody's story here is going to be unique, and that's good. There isn't one set way to get into the sustainability career. So I want to tell you my story, and again, we'll open it up so you can ask questions. So, I mean, I was thinking that you guys might be asking yourselves, where do I start? You can start really anywhere. The key is just to do something. The reason I picked these pictures, and some of them aren't very sharp, is that was me. That was me working in an office after I got a psychology degree, and I was like, I know I don't want to be a psychologist. I love to travel. I was born in Mexico City. I was raised in Israel. I worked in a kibbutz. I lived a few years in Argentina. So I knew that I wanted to see the world, and I just didn't know what to do. And that's very common. I think you guys have a lot of pressure on you to decide what you want to do and when you want to do it and how to be the best, and you're at a prestigious school and you want the best, best paying job, a lot of prestige, but everybody has their path, and you are the only one that can find how to get on that path. So the reason I put these here is because you can start anywhere. I really encourage people to volunteer. If something interests you, if you want to be planting trees with tree people or cleaning beaches with Heal the Bay, you're going to meet like-minded people that care about nature, that care about the planet, that care about animals or water or soil. And the more you build that community, that's going to be a step on your path. The reason I put that picture up there is I literally just last week made an offer to a young man who went to school at UC San Diego and studied environmental studies, but was working as a janitor at school. And he said, you know what? I know the backside of trash recycling. I know what people throw away. I know what they shouldn't throw away. I see what the school generates. And I said, I love it. And obviously there are other reasons for hiring somebody, but you can start anywhere. So my path from that landed me in a temp office job and happened to be an environmental engineering firm. And I was literally typing reports. I was just doing basic office work. And I started getting interested. I started getting interested in AB 939. Does everybody know what that is? The first California law that mandated that cities have to send less trash to the landfill. So at the time, it passed in 1989. It was by 1995, you have to send 25% less of your trash to landfill. And by the year 2000, you have to send 50% less of your trash to landfill. So all these cities came to us and said, how are we going to do that? I mean, just in LA County, I think we have 99 cities. Is that right? So all these cities said, how are we going to reduce our trash by 25% and then by 50%? So we were writing all these plans about how to educate people and what materials can be marketed, and this was all brand new in California. And then one day, I was probably not looking quite that forlorn. I was kind of starting to enjoy this stuff about trash. Somebody said to me, hey, we know a big company that needs a recycling coordinator. And I was like, I'm here, I'm interested. I've been writing about all these recycling plans, and now I want to go do it. I want to get my hands dirty. And as luck would have it, that's where I landed. So in 1992, I landed in this very vast studio. Did I put a map of the studio on here? Yeah. So I landed at this very vast studio. Those are all sound stages. These are all buildings. Some of you have probably driven right here on Pass Avenue where you see all the big signs. And they said, we need a recycling coordinator. We need to figure out how we're going to divert our paper, our cardboard, our cans, bottles, plastic. And you might think, God, that's so basic. But in 1992, when there was absolutely no recycling program, there weren't companies that were picking up these materials, I had to figure it out. I had to figure out, how am I going to get all of the materials in all of these buildings, literally hundreds of buildings. This is 100 acres, and there's another 30 acres north of that. And there are other buildings across the street. That this building up here is like, how am I going to move all this material from people's desk sides to big containers? So I'm not going to tell you every single piece, or I would be here until tomorrow. But this is the challenge of just starting something and figuring it out. This is actually animated, so I think it's kind of cool. And the part that I'm really proud of is this. When I started working there, I said, someday, by the time I leave, I'm going to get solar on these roofs. It took me probably 16 years, 18 years until I got that solar done. So, it started with recycling. It literally started with trash. And I like to say today that for a lot of people who are interested in the environment or in anything sustainability, that's a gateway. It's hard to talk to people about energy efficiency or photovoltaics or stormwater pollution, but recycling, they get. They know they're using paper, they're using cardboard, bottles, cans, etc. At a studio, it was a little bit challenging because I very quickly realized that not only the quantity is absolutely huge, but I had to look at what are we actually buying. So it became a whole procurement program. You guys may have never heard of this computer paper, green bar computer paper, but this was our highest grade commodity. This was a small quantity, but we could get paid for it. So I had to also figure out what is the financial cost benefit of recycling, right? Because Warner Brothers is still a business. Yes, they wanted to do the right thing, but they had to pay for my salary, and then they had to pay for custodians, and then they had to pay for bins and for marketing. Well, I had to make the program pay for itself. So I had to really quickly learn what are the commodities and who can I sell them to. And often there was no market. I had to go to the various recycling companies and say, how much will you give me per ton for computer paper or white paper or mixed paper? The reason I put this here is just to give you an idea. Today you have one recycling bin that takes probably everything, right? Single stream recycling is what we call it. In those days, those were just the paper categories. Then we had bottles, then we had cans, then we had cardboard. So we would have like 7, 10 containers. I'll go through these fairly quickly. Then I started looking at the production, and I'm thinking, you know what, there's a lot going on those stages that gets thrown away. This is the Oval Office. I cannot tell you how many different television shows and film productions built their own Oval Office. The Oval Office is the Oval Office is the Oval Office, right? And you'd say, why can't they reuse it? It's the exact same thing. But no, so-and-so director wants their own look, and so-and-so producer wants their own look. So I had to figure out what to do with all that lumber, and the lamps, and the carpet, and the furniture. Again, just various materials, stuff that, you know, it's not like you can Google it. Maybe today you can. Where do I recycle carpet? You know, and there's carpet recycling initiatives. But then there was absolutely nothing. Paint. So I started a whole program that was called Second Time Around, giving these materials to nonprofit organizations, schools. So paint for reuse for painting over graffiti, or carpeting for shelters, or the reason I put rocks there is we gave it to landscaping for different colleges. Furniture, computers, lighting, and that was a way to not only keep it out of the landfill, but create a community of organizations that could use our materials. Energy efficiency, again, I'm trying to tell you about, 18 years of how the program grew, but once you start looking at one area of sustainability, it's all interconnected. So I guess in that day, there really, I don't know if today there is a pathway that people tell you, first do this and then do that. You got to figure out what is the impact. And I realized energy was a huge impact. So when I started the energy efficiency program, the first thing I did is put together a task force. I got people from operations and facilities, and they have their own mechanical engineers, the guys who work on air conditioning, electrical engineers who work on lighting, procurement, HR, and we put together a task force, and I said, okay, we're going to set our goals of what our mission is and what kind of savings we're going to look for, and we proposed it to senior management. I think the first year we might have gotten $100,000, which was a lot. But by the end of the first year, we had $1 million in savings. So that just opened the door for us, and every single year we got more money and we got more energy savings in lighting and air conditioning. That led me to think, well, energy is not the only piece of the building, right? We have water usage in a building. We have air, indoor air. What are the materials that we are bringing in? What kind of paint do we use? What kind of carpet? What kind of adhesives do we use under the carpet? What's the lighting like? And there I really focused not just on the building, on the materials part of the building, but also about the people. And that just opened a whole source of support from executive management, because I said, you know, your people that you're paying for in those buildings are probably 90% of your cost, the salaries. So if every person in that building spends 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes out of their 8-hour day thinking, oh God, it's so cold in here, which happens to me all the time. Or, God, it's so hot in here. Oh, God, the lighting, I have such a headache. Or whatever that makes them uncomfortable in the building, that's costing you money. So I figured just that 5 minutes, and I forget now what percentages of 8 hours a day, one of you can probably do it on your phone, those dollars are huge. So we should be building buildings that have healthy indoor air, right? That have good lighting, that have thermal comfort, that are easy to clean, that we don't need toxic cleaning materials to clean. So that led us to green building, and for me was the path to LEED. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of LEED. Yes? Okay, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Then, I think it was 1998, when we joined the U.S. Green Building Council, the first meeting I went to was literally a room like this, maybe about half of you in terms of the number of people in the room. And we literally went around and said our names and said why we were there. And today, USGBC has thousands and thousands of members and hundreds of buildings that have become certified. And I could get into a whole thing about LEED, because people say, well, why do we need the certification? Why can't we just go through the whole LEED process and not pay to get the plaque on the wall? And I can argue that till the cows come home. You need to follow a rigorous method to get to LEED. You can't just check the box and greenwash it, which happens a lot. I want to make sure I have enough time, so you can tell I don't like this subject matter at all, right? The green building led me to this, and as I told you, when I first started, I said, someday I'm going to put solar on these roofs. So the way, it's actually, you can't really see it in here, but if you see this building right here, you can see the edge. So that building was the old Jack Warner stable, literally, is where he kept his horses. And it's now called The Mill, which is where most of the Sept building happens. And there's a metal shop, and there's all kinds of different arts and, not arts and crafts, but you know what I mean, like crafts people working in there. And that roof was perfect, except that it was really old. So I had to go to our CFO and CEO and explain why this roof would be good for solar, but they'd have to pay to redo the roof. So many months and many financial projections later, they approved half a megawatt project on that, 500 kilowatts. And then later on, we built that stage from the ground up, and it's the very first LEED certified sound stage in the world. So all the materials it was built with, all the energy efficiency, all the solar, everything about it is according to the LEED guideline. So from there I thought, okay, now what? We've kind of done it a lot. We've done the recycling, we've looked at procurement, we looked at energy efficiency, building, solar. Now it's how can we build bigger momentum, bigger scale. And I got the other major studios to get together and we formed a task force. So all of the studios assigned a person like me, their environmental rep, and we started working together. How can we leverage each other? And we came up with what is now on the Producers Guild Association umbrella and their website, which you can look up, is basically a green production guide. So that any production, anywhere in the world, TV, film, can look up, what do I need to do to reduce my environmental footprint when I do production, no matter where I am? What vendors should I use? What questions should I be asking? You know, what do I ask my caterer to try and reduce waste? So this took us a very long time, and I think it has gained momentum. I think a lot more productions are using it. And the thing that I want you to kind of get from here is my motto, and people used to laugh at me at Warner Brothers, was I want to work myself out of a job. I want to make this part of how you do business so that you don't need me or a champion. You build it into the fabric of who you are as a company. So you write it into the contracts. When you go out to bid for vendors, it's in the language. When you talk to your productions, even if they're renting space from you, you're welcome to our home. This is how we do it in our home. And hopefully, I'm not there anymore, so hopefully it is all continuing. I do know that they've done more LEED buildings, and I have colleagues in the real estate department that constantly tell me about all the projects that are going. So I feel like I succeeded to some degree, in a small part, to make it part and parcel. I'll tell you a funny story. One of the materials I was looking at when we were doing procurement is plastic lumber, because plastics are so hard to recycle and it's so hard to make them into new products. Usually they get downgraded. And I thought, well, what could we do to help that market? We'll buy plastic lumber. Well, what do you use plastic lumber for? Cement parking stops. Those are usually like cement, and we don't need to buy cement because those crack, they chip, people drive into them. You know, you need rebar, so you need to bring a forklift, has to carry it and bring it to install it. There's like parking stops. And when we first compared the price, oh my God, the plastic lumber was so much more expensive. But guess what? A guy on a bicycle, a lot of stuff happens on a bicycle in a studio, could carry a couple of those under his arm and literally ride his bike and go install them. The labor savings were huge. So then we looked at, what about putting plastic lumber on the sides of trucks? Because the sides of trucks that carry the sets back and forth are made of wood. Well, guess what? Those break, those chip. Sometimes they paint them, sometimes they don't. They're really heavy. You have to lift the whole side to get it off the truck. So we tried one with plastic lumber. It doesn't break, doesn't chip, you don't have to paint it ever. I challenge you, when you're driving in the street or on the freeway and you see a production truck, take a look at the back. They are all plastic lumber now. So it makes me smile. I think, okay, we changed something so simple, so fundamental that we never thought about. Like, why do we use wood in these things to something that uses recycled content that is hard to reuse otherwise? Anyways, so coming back to the path, these are some of the things that I work on. EcoBiz is my own company. It was my license plate when I got my first car, was EcoBiz. So I thought, okay, make it EcoBiz, it's the business. Some of my clients now, Participant Media is a very socially and environmentally minded production company. I've been doing some work for the Avatar sequels for James Cameron, and my big project that takes up probably most of my time is Recycla, which is the City of LA's program for mandatory commercial recycling. And commercial recycling actually also includes apartment buildings. So you can look this up very easily. 8341 mandates commercial recycling. AB 1826 is about collecting organics, like food waste. And if some of you saw my computer here, I'll read it to you, and this always blows me away. If food waste were a country, it would be the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Think about that. Food waste, third largest country emitter of greenhouse gases. Mind-blowing. So those two regulations, AB 1826 and 1383, are about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I got a little philosophical here because I was thinking, you know, what do you guys want to hear from me? Like, not everybody can follow my path. And I don't want you to, and you should find your own path. And so it's up to you guys to write your story. What is it that you care about? For me, it's nature. That's what I love. I'm a scuba diver, although I don't get to do it very often. I'm a tree lover. I love to be outdoors. For me, it's right here. Even if I'm in the middle of the city and I see a hummingbird, it catches my attention to remind me this is what I love. So you guys have to find your own story. And what I would say is ask yourself some basic questions. And I interview a lot of people. I have, for the Recycla program, I must have gotten 100 resumes and interviewed probably 20 young people out of college. And I asked them, have you thought about, do you want to work in the private sector? Do you want to work in the public sector, government? Do you want to create policy? Do you want to work for a nonprofit? Do you want hands-on, or do you want to be in the office? And these are not binary. There are a lot of jobs that do a little bit of everything. But these are the types of questions that you can ask yourself to get to know, what is my path? How do I want to go about this? Do I want to work mostly independently? That's fine. None of these answers are good or bad. This is just about finding out who you are. Do I like to work in a team? Or do I prefer to just kind of be on my own? And you may not know. That's okay. Just try something. Try, like I said, volunteer. Find mentors. Find people that are doing something that you think is interesting and talk to them. I always love, in fact, a student contacted me and said, because he saw the speaker series, and said, I'm so heartbroken, I can't be there, but could you, it's okay if you don't have time. I said, absolutely, I'll meet you. So you get the sense, you know, do you want to
be super creative, problem solve? Or do you want to do a lot of data and kind of see where does the data take you?
And you have the opportunity, even in school, to ask yourself those questions and try to figure out where you're going. To me, the number one goal is get experience. And it doesn't mean that you have to have experience in the job that you're applying for. I know that that's a lot of pressure on you guys. And I know I have a lot of candidates that say to me, I don't have experience talking to customers, or I don't have a lot of experience in the recycling world. And I say, that's okay. I can teach you that part. I want to see who you are as a person. How are you going to come across when you're talking to a customer that has never heard of waste reduction or zero waste? I want to see how you're going to give a part of yourself to a customer who's so angry that they just don't want to listen to you, and they just don't care about the environment, and they just don't care about just make my trash go away. I want to see how you're going to handle that guy. And that's what I look for, is the person. I can't tell you that all employers are like that. I know most HR recruiters put your resume through kind of a cookie cutter and see and match up, you know, marketing, I can't, you know. But what I would tell you is that when you do pursue your first job, knock on doors, don't take the first no, be persistent, talk to people. If I'm the employer, the person that keeps in touch with me and says, hey, I'm still really interested, I really like this aspect of your job, I want to learn more about food waste, I have a garden at home and I want to know about composting, that's the person that I'm going to pay attention to. And mostly, excuse my corny, but follow your heart. But take your brain with you. It's really important, I think, as I said in the beginning, you guys all have a path. There is no one set path. I think we all know the great need, the great urgency for sustainability, for environmental protection, for public education, but you can go at it whichever way kind of floats your boat. There's a lot of work in the water arena. Soils are so critical. You know, if we don't build up good soil, we can't grow good food that has nutrition. How do we build that soil, which sequesters carbon, by the way? Composting, organics. I mean, this is how I think. Like now we have this new organics regulation. Nobody's really familiar, businesses aren't familiar with collecting food waste. Like, why? Ew. You know, this is what I get all day long. It's like, ew, flies, duh, duh. And I say to them, well, guess what? All that food waste is going to become soil, which means you're going to get better food in your restaurant, which means we're going to sequester more greenhouse gases, climate change. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't know that I gave you any specific advice other than everybody has their own path and you can each find your own path. And you're lucky to live in a time that is paying attention to sustainability, that we have the Gretas of the world that are speaking at the UN and saying, how dare you take our future away? And I wish you all the best, and I'll take questions. Wow. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for being here. Yes, I wanted to know, you started with Warner Brothers. How did you know how much to ask for? And then when you went solo, how did you set up your consulting price model?
Yeah, good. I didn't know how much to ask for. I relied on a lot of colleagues and friends. Like I said, the first piece was to get a task force together, like for the energy piece. For the recycling program, I just had to figure it out. I mean, I just had to figure out how many, I literally walked that entire campus and had to count how many buildings and how many copy rooms and how many kitchens, which means how many bins am I gonna have to buy and get the cheapest and put a budget together and say, I need this much to get bins together. And then I need labor. Okay, I'm gonna need 3 people. Oh no, I'm gonna need to add 2 more people. Now I need golf carts. Wait a minute, the golf carts don't work. I need flatbed golf carts. So it's all figure-outable. There wasn't like, you know, a book or a guideline. You know, I got told no a lot. You know, like, why should we spend this? How are we gonna save? And I mean, I can just tell you that people who do the job are the best resource. So I would go to the custodians and I would end up, you know, being there at night during the night shift, because that's typically when trash got picked up. And I said, you know what? I want this to be visible. I don't want this to be at night. So I had my custodians, the recycling custodians, switch to daytime. And I said, I want all recycling to happen during the day because I want people to see that it takes a person who picks up the container, who empties it into a bigger container, who then takes it to the golf cart, who then takes it to the big bin. Like I want people to see the effort that it takes. That just because you put it in the bin doesn't mean it gets recycled. When I went on my own, I had no clue, to tell you the truth. I called other consultants. I started by doing an hourly fee, but it really wasn't I didn't really like doing hourly. I was so used to, on the corporate side, I got a salary, no matter who called me. It could be, you know, HBO or Time Warner, or somebody would call me and say, can you help us put together the recycling program? Sure. If I were a consultant, I'd have to figure out, okay, how many hours do I need to do that, and what if it takes longer? And so I started doing monthly retainers. So my participant client, I do a monthly retainer. And they just call me as needed. In fact, Avatar was also a monthly retainer. At first I said, okay, I think I need to be like 3 hours a week on set, 5 hours a week on set. And then I figured it out, and then I said, you know what, let's just do a monthly retainer. I'll spend less time figuring out the hours, and you spend less time. You can call me whenever you want. So then they would call me on a Sunday. Oh, we need to empty the water tank, and we need to donate 200,000 gallons of water. So I wouldn't have to be there. Okay, one phone call was 15 minutes, and you know, writing this report was 3 hours. So that's my preferred way of working. The Recycla program is also actually, now that I think about it, it's also a monthly retainer. So I'm pretty much available all the time, which is crazy. Questions? Yeah.
Would you say that these changes are accessible to all communities, or is it more like the higher income communities that can afford to make the changes that these business plans?
What kind of changes do you mean?
Just like spending the money to get sustainable lighting and good air.
Good question. I would say that yes, when you have to make a capital investment, like change your lighting, it does happen more often with companies that have the funding. There are some programs that help low-income residents, for example. DWP will give you light bulbs and such, or you can get an energy audit. But I mean, that question is at the heart of a very big challenge, which is you often have to invest to get your savings in the long run. And it's not always available to everybody. I mean, recycling, yes, it's available to everybody. But, you know, it depends on what you're asking. There are some great nonprofit organizations that are trying to make solar available for anybody, everybody, so that there isn't that upfront cost. But the economics are a really important part of sustainability. And the way that we think about economics, I think, really needs to shift, because most companies are used to looking at very short-term gains, you know, quarterly earnings, annual earnings. Well, you know, that solar that the hardest thing about pitching that solar was the fact that the payback was going to be 10 to 12 years. Good question. Yes.
Do you have any advice for someone who's going to start their own green business or thinking about starting their own green business?
Well, I would say is ask yourself why. Like, what is the problem or the question that you want to answer? Like, you know, do you have something in mind, just in general? I mean, there has to be a need. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've ever heard of refill stations. There's an organization called Sustain LA that has been doing farmers markets where you can bring your, you know, like a detergent bottle or a jar and fill up soap, shampoo, you know, laundry soap, that kind of thing. And then they decided to expand and create brick and mortar, you know, a real store in Highland Park. So she saw a need, and it was about disposable plastics, like the fact that we use, you know, even a detergent bottle that's this big, you use it, and she says, you know, this detergent bottle was built really well. You know, you have the cap, you can measure, it has the little spout, like, why throw it away after one time? Even if you recycle it, that HDPE plastic, that number 2 plastic, not that useful. So why not reuse it? So she saw that need. So I would say first, like, you know, you have to have a reason why you're going to open your own business. Like, what is the need that you're going to fulfill? And I would say, like, be patient. You know, even that kind of refill business, that's going to take a long time to really change people's culture to think about reuse. You know, now there's a lot of awareness about straws. You know, I'll show you my stuff that I carry. But, you know, I'd say we're like 1% that carry a reusable straw. My thing is tearing, my reusable fork, right? It's so easy. It's so much more convenient to go to get something to eat and get the disposable, you know, cutlery, throw it away. You know, your soda cup, throw it away. Your water bottle. Okay, I recycled it. Well, but it's still wasteful. Like, why should I have, you know, I drink a lot of water. I would have gone through maybe 5 bottles of water a day. Even if I recycle them, that's wasteful. So I guess what I'm getting at is the population of people that do refill, reuse is still pretty small. It's going to take her a while to get that business really, really going, but she's devoted. And she leads by example. She's raising her kids to be that way. So I think if you are patient and you're not expecting, like, you know, overnight sensation, as long as you're fulfilling a need, you can do really well. And to kind of tie those 2 questions together, there's a great book, something about the bottom of the pyramid. Maybe you guys know about it, but, you know, there's the pyramid of wealth and get to the 1%. If you fulfill a need for the bottom of the pyramid, that's really huge. Because if you can provide, there's organizations that do cook stoves in Africa, right? Like, if you can build that kind of answer for a mass part of the population, then you'll do really well. Yes?
When you were talking about LEED, what are the measures taken to ensure that companies don't greenwash themselves, like that it's not superficial?
It's actually very rigorous. You have to have a person on the team that is LEED certified, that's taking you through every section of LEED. There's sites, water, air, materials, O&M. And then you have to submit all of your points, you know, the things that you are applying for points, and you have to document everything. So if you say, I recycled 80% of my construction and demolition debris, you have to actually have like weight tickets from the vendor, the hauler that took all your cement and all that. You have to prove it. Then USGBC has a whole arm that reviews that stuff, and then if they see anything that's questionable, they will come back to you and investigate more. Now, I have seen people say, oh, well, we're gonna mark, it's always happens with parking. People are so, oh, I have to have so much parking, you know, on cars. They'll say, okay, these 5 spaces are for van pool, and then they'll paint over it. It's like, just kidding. No, not van pool, it's gonna be real parking. So I have seen people try to get, you know, around it, but for the real substantive part, you really can't greenwash the lighting. You can't, I mean, you have to show what you bought, what you installed. And they have been talking for a while now about recertification, so that like after a period of a year or 2 years, I don't know what it is, you'll have to recertify. But the greenwashing, you know, in general, not in LEED, happens a lot. It happens a lot. And there's, you know, kind of that jumping on the bandwagon. All natural, all organic, all sustainable. Ask questions. I ask questions all the time. When we first contracted our recycling hauler at Warner Brothers, I literally followed the trucks. I literally got in my car and followed the truck because I wanted to see what facility are they going to. What are they doing with the materials? You know, and they actually did. They were saying, oh, we're building this great MRF in our Sun Valley thing, and it's going to be ready, and they never built the thing. So you have to really do your homework. Just because somebody says it's sustainable doesn't mean it's sustainable. There was another question, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious if you could expand on like your personal experience with studying something in school that like didn't necessarily directly pertain to your career.
Yes, thank you for asking that, because I actually did want to tell you guys. From where I sit now, I wish I had taken a lot more science. And, you know, maybe it was like the time that I went to school. Sorry, you won't believe this, but girls didn't do science. And we did much more the liberal arts. And I took a lot more literature and music and, you know, philosophy, and I ended up with a psychology degree. I wish I had done a lot more science. I'm great with numbers. I never took higher math. You will always use math in sustainability, always. Because now we look at data. We look at whether it's data on recycling or energy or solar or greenhouse gases or transportation, fuel. You need to know how to handle a lot of numbers. And you need to see, what is the data telling you? What questions is it making you ask? Like, why is this so much bigger than this? So I would say, you know, definitely do as much like statistics, which I know my kids who are, one is a graduate already of college and my son is in college now, he hates statistics. But I say it's going to come in handy at some point. The other thing that I think is really important is learn how to write well. I don't care what you're going to do. I see people write emails that are atrocious, that I cannot even believe that they got through college when I see some of the emails. You have to learn how to write professional emails. And I don't know that anybody teaches you that in school. So writing is really important. It can be, I mean, you might end up doing technical writing, but again, no matter what you do, you're going to end up doing some kind of writing. You know, proposals, you want to get money, or you want to be a consultant, you have to know how to write. Communication also. You may not believe this because I'm standing here, but I don't love to talk to people. I don't love to talk on the phone. I tend to be a more quiet, introspective person, but you gotta know how to communicate with people. You gotta know how to sit across from someone, whether it's a person that's about to give you money for a project, or somebody that you're trying to hire, or if you're project managing a bunch of different contractors, you have to know how to. I have to go to the stages and talk to the construction folks, the carpenters from the carpenter union. So these are like, these big, burly, masculine, like, yo, the girl, what, you're gonna tell me how to build that set, that MF set that I've been, building for 20 years? Yeah, right. I had to get their respect so that when they were done with the set, all that lumber would be separate from the rest of the stuff so I could recycle it. So, I had to figure it out, and so communication, writing, numbers, history is always good.
I would add to that what she's kind of saying is that those are skills that you can get in any major.
Yes.
And thinking about the skills that you get through the study of a particular topic and focusing on that, if you're going to move in a different direction than working as a psychologist when you majored in psychology, is the way to move into a new space. I would guess also psychology came into you found a way to
it did, but not in the traditional academic sense.
Right.
But I think about it all the time, like, how do I get people to care more? I mean, that is like the big question. How do I get people to care about nature, about the environment, about doing something? And, you read a lot of things. It's about storytelling, it's about communication, it's about the emotional connection, it's all of those things. So in that sense, yes, psychology is very important because I think how to mobilize more people. No matter what they do, they care about the impact that they have on our environment. And it's not just about the environment, it's about us. I mean, when we're all gone, the planet's going to be fine. The planet's going to be regenerating. It's us. It's people that are going to be impacted. They are being impacted. So how do you get more people to mobilize? And that urgency, that's always been like, how can I do in 2 years what it took me 18? Yes?
Yeah, wondering too, just on that, California is one of the leaders. Does it help? That our policies are strong, or does it, where's the business industry? How is the business industry responding?
Yes,
Are they
good
now
question.
starting to take, I know Amazon just bought 100,000 electric vehicles.
Yes.
To the big, movement.
I think it very much helps. And I think the businesses that say, oh, California is, too stringent, it's too costly, it's too many environmental laws, I'm going to go to Texas. And I know a recycling company that did that. Fine, go. But it absolutely helps because we are leading in every way, in electric vehicles, in solar, in really every way. And I don't know if you heard, Gavin Newsom spoke a few days ago. What was it? It was when Trump said that he was going to not allow California to have more stringent, California fuel standards. And he said, we have 5 times as many jobs in the clean air arena than we do. I forget how he said it, I'm not saying it accurately, but he basically said the economic benefit is actually there. Recycling, a lot more jobs than landfill. So I think it absolutely is important. And I know when I go to conferences, I used to go to like C40, the cities where all the mayors from cities used to get together. They all want to be the best. So they would see the cities that come from California and go, God, these guys are the leaders. I think it's a very good thing. And if we didn't have these kind of laws, do you know how hard it would be to get all businesses to recycle in Los Angeles? If we didn't have a state law, I'd be banging my head against the wall. Which I do a little bit anyway.
So the students in 320A are doing a bit of a project this semester on food waste.
Yes.
And so I would be interested to hear about the challenges and the way you've faced challenges in getting people to do something with their food waste in Los Angeles.
Yes. There are a number of challenges. One is that through the Recyclet program, and it kind of goes to your question earlier, it costs you more. So it costs you to have organic service. However, if you have organics collection, you can reduce the size of your trash and save money. But it's hard to get customers to see that. Another challenge is space. Oh, I had my trash all together, then you forced me to get my blue bin for recycling. Now I have to get a third green bin for my food waste. Where am I going to put it? So space is actually a huge challenge. There's the yuck factor, that people say, it's going to smell and it's going to get flies and what if I get maggots and the health department. And so we have to have answers for that. So first of all, the LA County Department of Health does allow for organics collection. What we try to do is make it frequent enough that you don't have the smells and flies. Actually, I should back up. Probably the biggest barrier challenge is that we don't have enough facilities that can take the material for composting. So the state was very wise to say we need to keep food out of the landfill, but they're not being quite as judicious with giving permits to facilities because the air emissions are, especially in areas like the San Joaquin Valley, which is where there's a lot of space and a lot of facilities go to site there. I'm sure you've heard the NIMBY, people don't want a composting site in the city. So in the San Joaquin Valley, the air quality standards are so stringent that you have to have covered composting so you don't have any methane emissions. And it's very hard to permit a facility, to get the permits for a facility. So for example, the company that I'm doing the consulting for is Universal Waste Systems. They own their own green waste facility. They don't yet have the permit to do food, but we're doing small quantities as pilot. So, wish I had more time, I'd show you some really cool video, but of the facilities that exist. But I would say that's a big challenge. One of the things that I try to do with a lot of our customers that have edible food, so it has to be a decent enough quantity, is to say donate the food. You know, there's the EPA hierarchy. I don't know if you guys are studying that, but the EPA hierarchy for organics is first edible food to people, then food to animals, then composting, and then landfill, and that's it, landfill. The thing is that there's no one answer. And, you know, this is what I like about my consulting job is first I ask, well, who are you? And, you know, what is your business and what do you do and what are your, you know, because not every place that has organics is the same. They're different in size, they're different in the kind of quantity that they generate, and do they make it off-site or on-site? You know, is there enough that can be donated or maybe not? It's a small quantity. We're starting to work with LA Compost, which is a nonprofit organization that we love. In fact, that's where we met. So LA Compost has figured out that because big facilities are so hard to permit and to site, they're going to do local, what they call hubs. So they have, I think, 7 hubs in the Northeast area, which is where our Recycla program is, or, you know, my part of it. And we're working with small restaurants to collect their organics in 5-gallon buckets, which we pulled out from a bakery that uses those buckets for butter. And so we're reusing the plastic buckets, taking them to the restaurants, telling them, put your only food, no plastics, none of this like biodegradable plastics, only food, and then take them to the local hub. Now, why are we doing it? We're not making any money out of it, but it keeps the food out of the landfill, and hopefully it's going to help those customers save some money. So you have to be creative. It just depends on, every situation is different. But there's so much opportunity, especially in the food waste area. So much opportunity.
Okay, I think it's time to let people go. Thank you so much. Let's give our speaker.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for those in the 320A, you'll see John on Tuesday.